welcome to the next show. Really looking forward to today and to my talk. I'm Oskar Trautmann. I've been with Accenture Song for many years as an experienced strategist, and today I have the honor to talk to Payal Arora. And she is a professor from Utrecht for inclusive AI. She founded the FemLab, a very, very beautiful initiative that we will talk about today. She has wrote many amazing books. Two I would want to talk with her about today. The Next Billion Users was the last time she was here at Next with us. And the other book, which I read over the last weeks and really enjoyed, and I would hope that you read it too, is From Pessimism to Promise. And today, I'm very, very happy to talk with you here at the Next conference. I heard your talk today. It was my absolute favorite of the day. And I'm very much looking forward to learn more from you and have a great Next show here. So thank you so much for being here.
It's good to be here, and do you say that to all the guests? But I just believe that. All right. I'm happy that you like the talk. So,
it's very truthful. I've worked in automotive for the last 5 years, so you caught me with the first example from BYD. And it was funny to see because there's many people from automotive brands in the crowd. And everyone was like, oh, is it BYD? I don't know.
But isn't that interesting that nobody raised their hands?
Exactly.
Not one person raised their hand. And I thought somebody would have identified that car, right?
Exactly.
Oh, so
and I sat in it.
That was fascinating.
I sat in it and I couldn't identify it. So
really?
it's very, very interesting thought experiment. But maybe just so the ones that haven't looked at your talk yet, it will be posted online for all of you to see. And I also recommend to look at that. But maybe your main thoughts that you wanted to bring across during your keynote, what would they be? What would you want to share with our audience listening to the next show?
Yeah, basically, I use this BYD as an example because a decade ago, Elon Musk, when interviewed about what he thought about BYD, which is a Chinese electric car, and he couldn't stop laughing. And they're like, "What are you laughing at?" And he said, "Have you seen their car?"
Mm-hmm.
And then today, BYD overtakes Tesla, and he's begging the European, governments to create trade barriers because he's like, our industry will be completely destroyed if you don't do that because it's just too damn good. And this story is really illustrative of what is happening, and that's what the book captures: is this overestimation of the kinds of innovations that are going on in the West and the underestimation of the rest of the world.
Exactly.
And I give numerous examples of what's going on in the global South to disrupt people's, mindsets on what the global South is, which is kind of shaped from decades ago, of very stereotypical notions of poverty porn to, them being beneficiaries or maybe even just mere users and consumers.
Yeah, for me it was eye-opening because I never sat in a Chinese car when I was at IAA last year and looked at the cars, and I was also driving a Tesla that week testing, and I was like, this is so much better than everything else. Like sitting in the car, like how it was built, and 10 years ago everyone was still saying, they will never catch up to us. That's why I think it was the perfect example to start a talk in Germany, since many of us touch up to the automotive industry. It's the pride of the nation to some degree. So it was fascinating to see, and I liked many stories in your book, but maybe at the beginning, just because of course Forbes called you the next billion champion, and I think it's very interesting how you take this topic of the bottom of the pyramid and just move it forward. But since your book, the next billion years, came out 5 years ago, right? 2019. Do you think we're already there? Are the billion already online now, or where are we at currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the countries now with the cheapest mobile internet are majority of them in the global South. We're talking about Cambodia, India, Nigeria, Israel, etc., right? And a lot of these countries, basically, it's not mobile first, it's mobile only. A lot of it is happening, on the go, and seamlessly, right? And it's so deeply integrated into their everyday lives, from the way they shop, the way they talk, romance, etc. So, and it's very naturalized, which for us, we still think in terms of online and offline. It's again the mentality, right, of we go offline, right? And I think things are changing a lot. Like, for example, live streaming. Like, Amazon is considering it and is playing around with it now.
Yeah.
It's so established in so many parts of East Asia. They're like mega stars of live streaming, which for those who don't know is basically, there's basically people feel that it's more authentic when people are selling on a live and answering questions, which are like, it's a different skill set. Because you feel like you can trust that person.
Exactly, it's like your brother, sister, friend.
Exactly, and yet you can get catered to, right? Because you have a specific question.
Yeah.
And this is not just happening in some high-end with some high-end technologies. I think COVID really changed things around. Like, for example, in Bangladesh, when people were forced to go, at home, and a lot of women garment workers had to repurpose themselves. They took to Facebook live streaming, and they started to sell the saris from home, and they started to reach a global audience because a lot of their garments are heritage industries, and so they're skipping the intermediaries. So a lot happened because of COVID, and within 2 months, Bangladesh got their national fintech system, and so did India then. And so, things have moved really, really fast.
Yeah.
And, what happens in a month or two there takes 5 years in Europe, because people move much slower. It's, it's just the way it is. Yeah.
It's very, very fascinating how because the creator economy is something I also teach my students at uni. And I think like 10 pages I will copy paste from your book and teach to my students, because I always look for this broader perspective, because of course it is tough, without making it like poverty porn-ish, to take that perspective, go and look at how people do it online. And also I found that TikTok for me doesn't work because I get very addicted to open your perspective that way. But 50 million creators online, and most of them in the global south. And I really like this live shopping example, because now German brands like Douglas, who sell cosmetics and stuff like that here, they started it 1 or 2 years ago and are now the benchmark in Europe for topics like these. And in China, as you said, the main job people want to do is live streamer or be a creator, because it's the fastest way out of poverty into a better life. And if you would really look at these markets and take them seriously, you could learn that so much faster and adapt it to the European market. So, but for the creator economy in Europe, because of course it's also a topic for us and what we think about, what we sell to a certain degree, how can we learn from their approach, these creators, towards their audiences, how they use their tools, and how can we maybe learn from them? And
one of it is the youth dividend, because one of the reasons why it's much slower in Europe and in the US is because 90% of the youth in the world today live in the global south, and young people by nature are more adaptable. They pick up tech, and that's just the way it is. It takes us longer as you grow older, and it's just the nature of life. But that's why I'm emphasizing why we need to design. We need to partner with the global south, because there's a lot also they can of course learn from Europe and the US. But basically Western countries have stable democracies. They are far more tuned into issues of privacy, safety, security, which is really essential to build strong guardrails, like the fairness, because we're talking about liberal democracies enjoyed by only 7% of the world's countries, majority of them being in the West. So this is our forte and our way in which to make sure these technologies are not a wild, wild west, because we've already gone through that, right? On the other hand, we need to look at what they bring to the table, which is they have this enormous enthusiasm, experimentation, the stomach for failure, the courage for, getting back on the horse again, because they're young and they're determined to shape their future in a different way. So a lot of these creators are basically spending ridiculous amounts of time, from 6 to 8 to 10 hours a day. And the reason is that they are so petrified of being their father or mother. They don't want to be, a farmer, herder, they just don't want a sanitation worker. They just don't see it. They don't want to do another replay, and they see it as a lost generation. And So this is obviously more exciting,
Yeah.
right? So they're learning how to be authentic. What does authenticity mean? They study user reactions. They're constantly looking at the back-end metrics. They're coming up with different formats. And also the most important thing is part of the authenticity, they're running it by their followers and saying, what do you think? Because it's okay to involve and that relationship building.
Yeah, they don't have so much
critical.
fear. They just do it. I think that's what we lost.
Because they don't want to put out a finished good, very good or service, because they already realize it's part of a co-creative effort with your consumers themselves, who are followers, who are, there's a degree of followers, right? Like some are dedicated ones, and then you work with them, and also you share creative attribution with these followers. So there's also a code of ethic and care, and they understand that for the survival game, because there's a high level of intolerance to breaking that code. It's not enforced, but it is judged very harshly. So there's all these dynamics which are not so much technological as social in nature, which we seem to, we're reinventing the wheel if we don't pay attention to that. That's all.
I think that's also one of the parts of your book I like the most. Or what I took away from it, where there's light, there's shadow. It's not like you're saying we need to do it exactly like the Global South does. We just need to get back to our roots and experiment again and be playful and get back to DIY. And don't overthink everything so much, and also give everyone their seat at the table. That we don't act so arrogantly and say, no, China has this regime and that we can't talk to them and can't respect the way they are putting out innovation. Because we always use this hammer on the head, and you used the example of, but if we would always say in the US, why have you so much public shootings? But we are still using them for so many benchmarks. And we know where that took us over the last years. So I really appreciate your take on this, but maybe to also talk about your other projects, FemLab, because of course I really appreciate your feminist approach to AI, even though, of course, you are an ally to all of these countries, you still see, a patriarchal system is not an optimal system, but there's always also ways to innovate within these systems and look at it that way. One of the cases I really liked was from FemLab, your research on the female taxi drivers or Uber drivers. Could you maybe give us that example again?
Yeah, so basically a couple of years ago, we came up with this organization, FemLab, with my partner in India, Usha Raman. And so the FemLab team, one of the leads in the ride-hailing, her name is Pallavi Bansal, and she was leading the research. And we had a really interesting set of insights because we focused on women ride-hailing workers, because there's a huge scarcity of women drivers in the Global South, but there's a high demand for them. And why is that so? Is because a lot of user groups feel safer if they're women drivers. For example, taking children to their school, they prefer a woman, or the elderly, because there's a sort of stereotype of women are more caring, or basically, guess what? The other, basically other women, which is 50% of the population, right? Girls and women, because it's not good to be with a male stranger in a car. And already we know that public space is not as accessible in many of these Global South countries, and some are regulated, like in the Middle East, where it's mandatory to be with a male guardian and whatnot, unless you're with a female, right? And so with all these requirements, what is going on? And so we focused on women drivers, and we started to understand how technologies are not built with women, the women at the center of it, because there is a gender dynamic, and what is it that they look for? And it's oftentimes very small, humble interventions which would make a big difference between why women drivers decide to take on this job or not. And one of the dominant ones was that they don't have access to clean, safe toilets. So it was all about toilets. Basics. It wasn't even in the night, because one of the things we thought is, maybe they don't feel safe in the night.
They
said
loved it.
Yeah, exactly, because they said it was very quiet. And because all day it's like the kids and the husband and everything, they live in a joint family and they don't have this, for them it was almost meditative. And it felt also freeing because streets are relatively less crazy and peaceful. So what they would have preferred is access to toilets which are clean, safe, and also mapped on their, on their tools. So, and this could be a very easily implementable, system. So it's just if we listen to them, because it's a huge, opportunity for even these companies to recruit them if they only attended to what their needs and concerns are, right?
Yeah. And I also really liked an easy solution to maybe also, if then a male person is alone with the woman in the car, how to not get them let them be less disrespectful, I guess. Think about your mom. Is this your mother driving you, or like bring that perspective in. If it helps, then it's the first way. And I really like this easy, approachable way of thinking about it, because we need to get back to the basics with many things and don't overthink them in so many ways. But I think if we listen more to also creators and individuals in the global south and really look at it and co-create, we could go back to this more, I guess, frugal innovation. Do you have any tips you can give companies here who've been maybe too spoiled over the last few decades and now really have to cut costs again and think differently in order to move forward, what they can do differently?
One is to, especially in this very tight budget scenario we're facing for the next few years to come, possibly, particularly in Europe, I think it's really important to then keep our minds open to co-designing, co-creating with the global south. One, of course, you could say, it's because it's much more feasible because the costs are much cheaper. But that's the old school way of outsourcing, which is basically, I know what I need and want, and let me disseminate it for cost-cutting purposes. But times have changed, and given that they have already pioneered and they're leading the way on fintech, we're talking about solar, to EVs across board in so many different ways, live streaming like e-commerce, and name it. And it's either, many of these countries are leading the way, and with AI, large language models are being built in data light ways. So, if you're worried about cost cutting, it's about energy, which means you need to look for good ideas. And there's a lot of good ideas out there, which could be a win-win in a sense that if you find out how they're, building their large language models, considering they have very limited resources as well as energy use, and that they can't just, build entire data centers which absorb a lot of their water, because there'd be community wars. So they obviously, for them, it's a survival game, and it would be very conducive if companies start to, tap into that without a prescribed model. So I think that the play space shouldn't happen in a laboratory in Europe, in the fortress, but rather already start co-creating at the get-go. And we all have prescribed models. I'm not saying that the global south doesn't have prescribed models about the global north either. Everybody does. The question is, can you put it at the table? Because it can be a win-win solution, because they need the know-how, scalability, whereas even the global north need their audiences, the followers, the users. So it's not just producers, but also the users. But don't look at them as mere data points, which would be a
shame.
Absolute shame.
And you lose so many good ideas along the way. And maybe to talk about the topic AI as well, since you're a professor in this topic, and especially last year at Next, together with my ex-colleague and friend Yasemin, we talked about diverse AI and how we can build LLMs to be more diverse, because currently they are trained on sexist, chauvinistic, patriarchal internet and training data. So from your perspective and your learnings, how can we as changemakers at Accenture and other technology companies enable a more diverse AI that in a sense then will help both the global south and the global north in the future?
Well, I mean, one of the most fundamental things to make robust large language models is to be multilingual and multicultural. Because right now it's not reflective of the majority world's ways in which they express themselves. So we're talking about labeling of data. They may not think in those terms, they may not search in those terms, the way in which they want to be represented, right? So actually, in the next few weeks, we're going to do a formal launch, but I'm launching a lab we call Inclusive AI Lab with the head of AI research at Adobe, Laura Herman, and we have this amazing consortium together from the 1/3 civic sector from around the world, 1/3 industry, and 1/3 international academics. And the goal is, how do we do exactly that? How do we diversify our data sets? Because look, we've been talking about how the internet's not designed for the majority world. And we're like, there's, then we went into the algorithm, how algorithms are oppressive, are biased, are, are doing this kind of surveillance on specific kinds of populations, targeted based on race, etc., gender. And now what trains these algorithms are data sets. In the end of the day, if your data is skewed towards, with heavily stereotypical visions of the world, then of course the algorithms and of course AI is going to reflect those disparities, reflect those stereotypes. So we are in the midst of literally building fresh data sets, because what we have is a data deficit in these areas. So on one hand, we have a data glut of the same old, and then we have a data deficit. So how do you build on that? But also, how do you allow for small data sets to be effective too? Because we do want to make a less of a carbon footprint, right? And so all this is happening, and we're literally getting into it. But there's a lot of momentum, but the most important thing is multilingual, because that's really key, and we have the human resources to do that. Actually, what's very exciting is people from tier 2, tier 3 towns in many parts of the global south are recruited to train not just in the languages and the way in which they speak, but the accents, which we always seem to miss, because it's very heavily skewed already towards certain kinds of accents. And so we're broadening those parameters. So inclusion looks not just at the ways in which we look and we see, but at the way in which we hear each other, and these tools can be responsive in a really multisensorial way, right? So
and I think one of the great things when you're doing this, from FemLab, because what I always tell my students, which are predominantly females, go into AI, because use your skill set that you're now building. I mean, Gen Alpha is growing up with AI as the most natural tool. Then Gen Z, like I grew up with social media and everything. But use this power that you understand AI, know how to talk to it because you grew up digitally, and use it and go into AI as females, because we need that diversity in perspective. Because currently it feels like it's 90% males I talk to working in the AI field. And with that, we only get worse and worse data sets, and just exclude more and more people. What would you tell young women who want to go into AI and to to move into that direction?
Well, one of the things which is a sort of a catch-22 is that one is that women think it's a bro space, right? And this is one of the reasons. It's not so much that it's difficult to do, because actually girls have systematically done better in schools around the world, including the Middle East, despite all the conservativeness. So they just tend to be very good in school. But then what happens? Why don't they go into these industries which are very lucrative and powerful? And I think so that is one of the big hesitations. But what's happened today is things have changed, because now programmers are getting a little worried themselves, because you don't need to be, it's like developing a website, Before you had to do a lot to be a website designer. Now it's you don't need
Copy,
that.
paste in.
Exactly. Now you need to have a design and visionary perspective of how do you want to display your content in a way which appeals to a certain kind of audience. It's content driven, not technique driven. And today that's what's happening. It's not so much the code, it's the questions we're asking that can shape that code. And so a lot of the biggest challenges today are social in nature.
Yeah.
And I think that way anyone can get involved. And the barrier of entry is at that point. In fact, I would say not just women, but anyone who is humanities driven, because you have computer scientists and you have humanities scholars, and they are asking socially relevant questions. Here they're talking about techno-solutionism. And the fact is we need both to listen to each other, because you can't come up with these pipe dreams of, oh, there shouldn't be any surveillance, tracking is bad. Well, sometimes tracking is good. Oh, you are enjoying these tools that require certain tracking when you go using your Google Maps. So there's these, we have this big gap between, and I would tell them, like, jump in, because asking these questions which are socially related means that you can actively involve yourself in the conversation, but also shape the very data that will shape the systems that are infused in the way you are living your life right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Beautiful. Yeah. There's one last question. I want to deep dive into that topic more in our podcast later. But since, you write a lot about Gen Z as well, you're teaching Gen Z at the moment as well, and I struggle with this a lot, this pessimism that is predominant due to growing up within COVID, having less and less chances in the job market. What do you tell your students in Gen Z? What can they take away from the Global South, the 90% of people living in the Global South being Gen Z, to get rid of a little bit of this fear, looking into the future and being more hopeful when they look at the future?
It's pessimism is something, so it bakes into our mindset, and then it basically paralyzes us, because when you're pessimistic, then you feel more dismal about the future, which means you don't feel mobilized to make a change.
Yeah.
And so we need to turn that around, and one of the things I do time and again is to remind them of what they have. And I don't mean it in a sort of grandmother, oh in my days, no, but it's like, is that, like, I underline the fact that we have something so precious as liberal democracy, which means that in real terms, they get to choose who they love, who they live with, who they befriend. They have certain kinds of freedoms to move, enjoy the public space.
Who they vote for.
Who they you may not like the politics, but their rules and regulations, the laws are still designed for the citizens.
Yeah.
There are laws outside, and I give instances, which I think I live in the Netherlands, that takes, they're very proud about how open they are towards homosexuals and the gay community, and they were the first to allow for gay marriage. And I remind them that today, majority of countries in the Global South criminalize homosexuality. In Uganda, you can get sentenced to death.
Yeah.
And it's a wake-up call. And, it's not that, be grateful. No, but look at firstly what you have. Secondly, I validate their fears, because it is scary.
Yes.
And it's not that it's all like they're imagining it. Yes, loneliness is growing, right? There is a sense of a lot of change, especially with AI. Suddenly people are saying, well, maybe programmers are not the best thing. Maybe this, what do you do? Or, your jobs could be gone. And,
yes.
And I think what we have to realize is it's still that it's about relationship building. Get on board with relationship building, and across the world, keep your minds open, because the only way to change is to keep yourself open to change.
Yeah.
And once you embrace that, and everything takes an effort, you need to make the effort to reach out, then you can do things not on your own, because nobody's saying you should do it on your own.
Yeah.
And it's really important to collaborate to move forward, you know?
Yeah, embrace it and make it your friend, the uncertainty.
Exactly, yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'm very happy that I can talk more to you in a few hours. But
likewise.
That, was a blast. I'm very happy and blessed that we could do this this next show together and get to know each other, not just over LinkedIn, but now in real life. And I'm looking forward to diving deeper into these topics. And thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you so much. And likewise, looking forward.